It's time for policy discourse, and this time around we'll be looking at vocational training in Nigeria, vocational skills training in Nigeria, because there are reports that increasingly Nigerians prefer artisans from Congo, Benin Republic, to do some of the construction jobs and some other tasks that they would need to carry out. Not as if there are no Nigerians who are skilled in this area, but why the preference for those who are of Congolese, Togolese, and Benin Republic origin? So this is what we intend to find out today. And we had to go get ourselves an expert in this field so that we can look at this. So I guess this morning we'll be talking about it. And before we bring in our guests so that we can look at the issue of vocational skills in Nigeria and why some of the jobs are now being outsourced, I need to ask Doc and Pri their vocational skill. So they will tell me if they've been getting patronage from Nigerians on that skill, or Togolese, Congolese, Benin Republicans are taking. Doc, do you have a vocational skill?
Well, it depends on what you call a vocational skill.
Okay, are you an artisan? Are there some things you can do with your hand?
I have not.
You know how they say, do you have handwork?
Handwork?
Handwork, yeah. But you know the street language is handwork. Do you have handwork?
Doc is an elite.
Okay. Doesn't do that. Do you have any handwork? What's your handwork?
I have. I'm into photography.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So, but this time, I don't know if Togolese, Congolese, and the others are taking over.
Togolese, Congolese. I haven't met them in the industry.
Okay, good for you. Well, for me,
Doc is an elite. He don't do.
I had one before.
I'm a farmer.
I had one before. You know, when you get out of school and they say you must learn a craft, you must acquire a skill. So I said, okay, let me venture into the hair business. And so I started that. But I know that, yes, we have Togolese in that. I don't know if they're taking over from Nigerian, but there's still a particular type of braid you want to do, and they say Togolese are better at it, or Ghanaians are better at it, that style of braiding than Nigerians. But you know, we're good at everything. So let's bring in our guest right now, and he will do justice to the conversation. So joining us virtually is Architect Ovie Binitie, who is an architect and a water solutions expert. So he himself is a very skilled man, and he'll be speaking to the fate of his skilled colleagues in Nigeria. Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can. It's good to see you, Architect Ovie Binitie, once again. I think this is the first time that we're having you on the show this year.
Yes, it is. Thank you for having me again.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. So does it that increasingly Nigerians prefer those from Togo, those from Congo, and even Benin Republic to carry on tasks like tiling and the POP fitting in construction work and so many other tasks in that field, but you also have Nigerians who have this skill. Why do you think there is the preference now? Let's begin from that report before we get into vocational training in Nigeria.
Back. It's
been fixed. I think you can go on.
It's about training. It's not about anything else. Vocational skills are premised on standards. Standards are only acquired through training. Training is a formal activity, and training is carried out by particular people, not just anybody. So these guys have gone through formal training, and so they have a better grasp of standards than we do. And that's the difference.
What's happening with vocational training in Nigeria? There was the establishment of technical colleges across Nigeria, and even to date, we still have some of them. But in the way they function, do you think the technical colleges, which were supposed to provide a formal, which is supposed to be a formal setting for vocational training in Nigeria, are meeting the needs, are being done in the way they were established, and actually living up to the aim for which they were set up?
So let's start with an understanding of what that echo has started again. Let's start with an understanding of what vocational skills are. Vocational skills are not tiling, plumbing, and all that stuff. No, vocational skills are the engine of every economy. Vocational skills are the engine of every economy. Now, at some point in Nigeria's history, the understanding of this truth went away. And so we decided that our institutions, Nigeria didn't need Nigerians were going to become graduates. And so the need for formalized technical training slowly died. And in the minds of every adult Nigerian, their children would never get involved with vocational skills, handwork. You know, we made it look like something not to be desired. Vocational skills are for the dregs of society. They never do well. Those who can't go to school, those who can't, make it in school, those are the ones who should go to vocational training. No, absolutely not. So funding died, like everything else across the country. Focus on sharpening the areas died. You're showing the pictures of, welders, auto mechanics. These people need theoretical training along with practical training. And this is the problem. An understanding of the need for vocational skills. It is not something that, if you can't do anything with yourself, go and learn a skill. No, that's not what it is at all, at all. So let me, state from the get-go that the goal of vocational education is to bridge the gap between education and employment. Vocational skills include baking, include packing the stuff into a bag in the shop when you have bought the things. When you wrapping the things, all of those things are vocational skills that can be curriculumized and taught because every economy needs these skills to grow. Every economy needs. When we talk about vocational skills, what comes to mind immediately is, building technology skills, mechanics, tailor. It's larger than that. 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 The echo is not coming from me.
In return, we will continue this conversation.
A workforce. The aim of vocational education is to produce a workforce.
So Doc just talked about the half-baked artisan or the half-baked craftsman training some other people, and we made a joke of them being quarter-baked. What is the situation?
Reality is that we call it the informal sector. You know, all these terminologies make them unattractive to people. You know, when you trivialize things, there is no attraction. I am an architect. I graduated architecture school in 1987 at 26. Here comes the echo again. 2006, when I was 46 years old, having been involved in several, projects and realizing the enormity of the lack of plumbing skills, I trained as a plumber. Now imagine me telling you that I'm a plumber. You won't believe me. So vocational skills are not at all things to be trivialized. Germany became the strong country that it is because of its pool of trained workmen. The industry that they have is standing on only one thing: trained workmen. Let me use the example of the building industry to tell you how important trained workmen are. Now, in the building industry, you have the professionals, what we refer to as the professionals, the architects, the engineers, the cost consultants, quantity surveyors, and all those people. Now, these people are the people who conceptualize everything that is happening. What percentage of any building do these people form? Now, below them, you have those who are supposed to have come out from, polytechnics, who are the ones who are the supervising level of the work that's going to be done. Those who interpret for the workmen to do. And then you have the workmen who execute and bring into physical form what the architect has visualized in his mind, what the car designer has visualized in his mind, build the parts, and then put them together. Now, this is the critical and crucial role that the workman, the people we refer to as people with handwork, this is the critical role that they play in the development of any economy. Singapore as a country, South Korea as a country, these were nations that were as poor, wretched is right now. Nigeria was in a better place than this before this time. But of workmen, we disdained the criticality of workmen. Now, a workman is a critical thinker. Is a critical thinker. How does this fit? Where best will it fit? This is the issue. So when we
Okay. That's well said, Architect Ovie. Can you hear me? Some time ago in 1986, under the Babangida-led administration, The then Education Minister, Babs Fafua, God bless his soul, imported the same system from Germany that they eventually tagged the 6334 system, whose design was actually to empower children who were getting into secondary school with some critical thinking method, and then, of course, giving them some training in different vocations. And the then president invested heavily importing equipments from abroad to all secondary schools in Nigeria to facilitate this process. What do you think went wrong? As the new education minister is talking about 12.4.
Yeah. Machines do not do anything. Equipment don't do anything. They don't function. Echo it back, sir. Equipment don't function. Equipment are utilized by people who understand those equipment. Now, all of that money was thrown away, and countries were enriched. Let me give you the example. Let me give you the example of South Korea. When the government of South Korea decided that they were going to be a car-producing nation, they discouraged the import of cars and decided to build a workforce of people who build car parts. Car parts. A man in his one-room apartment builds just brake pads. That's all he does. And he feeds the car industry with brake, and he was trained to build brake pads. So what went wrong then is that trainers were not available. You must have a ready pool of trainers. Under the Gowon administration, which I consider to be the apex of governance in Nigeria. We had skill acquisition center for the building industry. For example, we had skill acquisition centers at Federal Ministry of Works across the nation, where they had workshops where they trained artisans for the construction industry. Carpenters, masons. You know, a mason is not necessarily a bricklayer. Carpenters, masons, bricklayers, plumbers, electricians, these people were formally trained. And we had what you call the, forgotten what, trade tests. Trade tests that qualified you to be called any of these trades. But because of our lack of emphasis on the importance of these skills, successive governments said we didn't need our people to be artisans. They were going to be graduates. So what went wrong is that we imported equipment that could not operate themselves because we didn't have people, a pool of trained workmen that will build the next generation of trained workmen. So across schools, in my school, Federal Government College Warri, I've seen moribund intended users were not available. So the first leg of vocational training is to build a pool of trainers. Don't forget that the aim of vocational education is standardization for mass production. Standardization, mass production. So once standards are not...
You hear me? Architect Binitie, if you can hear me, I'll need to ask you one more question, and I need you to really take us deeper in this. I'm sure you're not surprised when there was a time in Nigeria we were bedeviled by building collapse. Even in the center of excellence, which is Lagos, building collapse was the order of the day. And this is not far-fetched, some of the reasons I think you have pointed out. Now that we have discovered all these loopholes and where we had got it wrong, we have gotten it wrong, where we had fallen short excessively, by way of policy, how do we fix this challenge?
By way of policy, we need to identify. See, this thing has to be broken down into legs and stages. The first stage is to build a pool of trainers. Without a pool of trainers, I am a qualified assessor of vocational skills. There must be a recognition of the need of these skills for the industry, for the country's economy. So, first of all, it is not, getting equipment. All that is premature. The first thing is to build a pool of trainers. Once you have a pool of trainers, then you can set up centers across the country to build, to pass this capacity on. It's a slow build. It's not a quick fix. It's not a quick fix. When I did my training in 2006, I didn't find where to train formally in Nigeria. I went online and trained from the
Continue the conversation. We do hope that we'll find another time to bring in Architect Ovie Binitie, who is an architect who will be in the studio physically, so we can have this conversation more and talk about the way out of this challenge. It's become a challenge, not just because we have skilled workers who are not really very skilled as they should be, but because those who are providing the skilled labor, those from Congo, Togo, and Benin Republic, because of the economic challenges in Nigeria and the depreciation of the naira, which was like an attraction for some of them to troop into Nigeria and earn a living, some of them have returned to their country, and so they're not in large numbers as they used to be. And another challenge with using artisans who were not resident in Nigeria is the issue of some of them running away when they are paid. So without completing the job, they just make away with the money and return back to the country.
But you see, a lot of people still come around. They have not gone anywhere. Togo is not better than Nigeria. They are all here. Benin Republic is not better than Nigeria. Their workers are all here. You see, the real huge issues in the industry is that you're having a lot of people within our environment who are not even participating. And I think Architect Ovie hit the nail on the head when he said that even calling that sector informal
sector is discriminatory.
Yeah, it's derogatory, not just discriminatory. It's derogatory. And because we have not elevated the status of the workman, a lot of people who can think don't even get into that space. And that is the principal challenge number one. First and foremost, the dignity of labor need to be emphasized. That the fact that somebody is a mason doesn't make the person less human. First and foremost, he is advocating let's even upgrade, let me use that language, the kind of description we give to people in that sector. let's agree that these guys are important. Like if you go to places like UK, not everybody can hire a plumber.
Yes.
Not everybody. So you must be well-to-do to be able to get the service of a plumber.
Or a driver.
So by first and foremost dignifying that trade, a lot will happen. But I also like the point that he raised, that equipment don't use themselves. You have to have human being to use equipment. Yes, we have equipment supplied. But unfortunately, those equipment didn't have people who were qualified enough to teach or train the students. So I remember in my own secondary school, we saw those equipment arrived. We saw them in pallets. And all till we left school, nobody opened it because I'm not too sure whether people knew what to do with it. And my school was in a remote village. And to tell you the level of penetration of government determination to see things really work.
True.
But I think it was like Architect Ovie has said, is like putting the cart before the horse.
Okay.
The government would have invested so much in training the personnel
Who
who
would
were going to
use
use this equipment before bringing the equipment. And of course, that gave room to vandalization, that those who didn't know what equipment were meant for had to vandalize them and sold them as cheap iron rather than putting them into good use. These are issues that government will need to do and say, how do we build capacity for those who want to be in specific field? Because beyond these workmen we're talking about, there's also this issue of the development that is happening right now in the AI space. And we're having, for example, people who have never coded before and they are teaching children how to code. And this is a big problem. Because you don't have experts who are doing this thing. And at the end of the day, you are not able to actually produce fully baked workmen. They will also become half-baked.
How do we ensure standard? Architect Ovie said that he's a technical skill assessor. He can assess a person's skill level, and determine if that person is qualified. So who does the standardization? What body does the standardization to ensure that you don't just go to do some apprenticeship under someone who has not even fully learned himself, and then you become half-baked as well?
Okay, so I got some of the lists of the schools that were government established intentionally between 1985 and 1993, and they all have different nomenclatures and they have different roles, and saddled with the responsibilities to produce these workmen. And for those who crafted these acts, saw the inputs, saw how important these people are to the nation. So we have the federal polytechnics, we have state polytechnics, we have private polytechnics, we have colleges of agriculture, colleges of health sciences and technology, colleges of nursing and midwifery. When I saw that, I was shocked. Specialized institution, that's monotechnics, innovation enterprise institutions, and vocational enterprise institutions. Then you now come to technical colleges. All these are institutions, both federal and state government and even private ownership, that serve as the centers that can conduct that, not only train the students who are coming into that space, but also conduct standardized tests and examination for them to be received into society and to be qualified as professionals who can handle all this responsibility. So I don't think we are in lack of institutions that will be responsible for setting the standard. However, the thing is, the government, by way of policy, needs to go back to the drawing board concerning this. You all remember how polytechnics have been fighting the government for putting them low and bringing the universities at this stage, and that even organizations, when you are employing someone from the universities, there's a level and a standard you accord them, and it even reflects on their remuneration. But when you are bringing someone from polytechnics, be it the federal polytechnics or state polytechnics or colleges of education, you beat down the standard, their nomenclature, or the reason why, then you see the disparity in payment.
Yeah, but I don't think payment is the real issue.
No.
It's even the institutions, first and foremost, delivering on their mandate. The point I just make is, I didn't go to a technical college. My school was a commercial secondary school. And those equipment were brought to the commercial secondary school. Now the question, which is of course what architect has spoken to, is that were there people in my school who could actually use those equipment? You see, beyond the disparity is the fact that, if we have to be frank to ourselves, because there's a whole lot that the government, for example, of Ibrahim Babangida did. The National Directorate of Employment is also there. That is also in charge of developing capacity for vocational trainings. Now the question is, those who are there as tutors themselves, do they have the requisite capacity to actually assess a student that this one is qualified to go out there to deliver excellent service? I saw something recently that really touched me. And this was a Benin musician who had trained some people, and you know what they call today popular freedom. And when he was going to do a public show, was to ask that, I trained this boy. Now the boy says he knows how to play, he wants freedom. So I've called this gathering to come and help me assess whether he can play. And so he goes on stage and play. And then give the guitar to the boy to play. And then the public are there to assess and said, are you sure that this boy represents me? And is he qualified for freedom? But it looks like fun, but it was not fun to me. Because when the boy was playing, you can see his master in him.
Replicated.
And people say, oh, he's qualified. And then, of course, the freedom rights are done. But most of the vocational training, I don't think they get to this level. You see, and these are the things that, for example, in universities, in polytechnics, in colleges of education, that projects are supposed to replicate. That if a student is graduating, whatever the discipline is, that is able to replicate, and this thing is set to standard to say, has this met the standard? And then the school give a nod. But what do you see? Even when the quality is not, because we are in a rush to release people into the society, we really care. So assessment is a fundamental issue that we need to pay attention to.
Okay, I'll wrap up the conversation with this, that where we have the polytechnics, some of the technical colleges, and it's more theoretical work that they do there. And when they need practical, they still go back to the town. They go to the roadside to acquire the practical knowledge and the practical skills. It becomes difficult for even the polytechnics and this college of education, or rather this technical colleges, to be the ones to standardize what they even go to the town to learn.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be the other way.
Yeah.
Because they're supposed to have the resource persons, the materials, the tools that those on the roadside, those in the town, the artisans do not have. But we find that the artisans go further in training and retraining themselves to become up to date with their skills. But where the problem comes is a transfer of knowledge. Some artisans hoard this knowledge. Even when the knowledge is paid for, by the apprentice who want to acquire. Some hoard it because they want to remain masters of the game, and leaving the apprentice with little or no choice so that there are less competition when they move out. And that's why for some in the fashion industry, you will hear those who have been under the apprenticeship of certain masters or certain professionals in that field tell you that there are certain designs. When the master wants to cut out those designs, they send you on an errand, or they don't do that where their students are. Because some of them feel it took them years to come by this. So you can't just come in 1 year. You can't just come in 6 months, in 2 years, and acquire this skill. There is that part. There is also the impatience on the part of the apprentice, on those who are acquiring the skill, setting the time for themselves to say, in 6 months, that's all I want to spend here. In 1 year, that's all I want to spend here. When the person who's passing on the knowledge is saying, you can't get this skill to the good extent where you are certified someone who has adequate skill. You can't get it in 6 months, in 1 year. They tell you, no, that's all I want. Just teach me what I need to know, the basics. I'll pick it up from there. So in 3 months, you have people moving out and say they have acquired certain skills, only for them to go out and then they're not doing the job as they should. And we need a body that assesses out of the polytechnics, but not everyone who has done vocational training has done so through the formal, what we call the formal institution, like the polytechnics and the college of the technical colleges. Some have done through individuals who now have their own training institutes, and some have done well to be able to assess, like the example you gave. And we also see that maybe in some fashion houses, in some other technical fields, where there is good assessment to show that yes, you have passed through this training and you are now certified.
You know, there's
but I think we need a central body.
Yeah.
Where before you parade yourself as a skilled laborer, as a skilled person in any field, you are assessed and certified by that body. And that body should be made up of practitioners in that field.
You know, Ovie mentioned something which of course was very fundamental, and he said the height of it was during the Gowon region. And you see, what happened really then was the fact that even the Nigerian Trade School that was in Yaba here, you can't get out of that school. You have to write an external exam. They used to call it London City and Guild. So before you become that you are a plumber or you are certified as a technician, you have to pass that exam. Because it was moderated from abroad. And today, that structure is no longer there. And I think we really need people like Architect Ovie, who took pain to go learn these things. Because some of these things that you see, when you see, for example, where some of our people work, even in terms of laying tiles, because measurement is a problem.
It is.
That you cannot actually become an artisan without understanding the principle of mathematics, measuring with ruler. And these are the things, you see some steps that are done on a staircase, and you see they are uneven.
You will see the wastage of materials.
Yes. So if you get abroad and see how these things are done, and the finishing is top notch. And I think that's where we need to really emphasize that we have people who have been trained themselves, hands-on, to actually be the one to lead this process. And at the end of the day, you will find that we are going to be able to actually raise an army of manpower that will take away a lot of burden from us rather than allow our neighbors, which is of course not bad anyway, coming here to actually take our job, because there's a whole lot of scarcity in that environment. In short, a little boy, one of a young man who was working for us recently, said the bigger problem is the fact that you have a lot of young people who want money but don't want to learn the rope.
We should try to correct that, because it's a challenge. Economically it is, and even for the safety of some of these construction works that we do. A while ago was talking about building collapse. Yes, when you employ unqualified hands to handle your building project, what would you get? So it's more like wasting money, being penny wise, pound foolish. But the thing at the end of the day is that the cost is not even borne by the unqualified skilled people, or those who parade themselves as skilled laborers who are not really qualified. It is borne by you who engage the services of these people. Because when they're done with your job, they leave. You are there. to bear the consequences that come. So it's something that as a society, as government, as a people, as parents, we should ensure. If your child is learning a skill somewhere, ensure that they know what they're doing there and not just counting time to later parade a certificate and then just say, oh, I've learned this, I've acquired this skill. But really when they're put to the test, they can deliver on the job.